Hello everyone and welcome to the first proper episode of STRI and Polypipe, talking about green infrastructure and all things water related. My name's Tom Young, I'm the Technology Manager at STRI, and today we've got a really interesting guest, Dr. Christian Spring from the STRI, and he's going to be talking all about the research that STRI have done looking at novel ways of constructing football pitches and taking ideas from the urban sector and sustainable urban drainage and incorporating them into sports pitches, which is a really novel way of looking at it, and hopefully one that means that football pitches potentially may be constructed differently in the future. Research, obviously, for STRI's point of view, is what the company's built upon, 90 years worth of research-related activity. And so we understand the benefit of research, but working with Polypipe, it's been really interesting to see their take as a manufacturer on the benefits of research. So I'll hand over to Charlotte and see what you think about the benefits of research in this kind of field.
Thanks, Tom. So for us as a manufacturer and innovator, we really need to have a robust evidence base to support the work that we're doing. And that's underpinned by strategic collaborations with people such as yourself and Dr. Christian. And we need to know that the Permavoid system can perform and that the passive irrigation technologies that we've incorporated are actually delivering those wider benefits on all our sports applications. So I'll hand over to Dr. Christian to give us the nitty-gritty and the finer detail.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Charlotte. It's a pleasure to be with you. And I'm excited to talk about the research that STRI has been doing on Permavoid and water management in sports and sports pitch contexts since 2013. So how do we build a sports pitch? That's the first question. And then how does water management and Permavoid as a solution fit within that? Well, typically a sports facility, a sports pitch is built out of a gravel drainage layer, which has a pipes within it. That in essence entraps and takes water away from the site, from the pitch. It's then built up of a growing medium, and that growing medium typically is about 300 millimeters in depth. So that's 30 centimeters or 12 inches in old money. And often that is built up of a sandy lower root zone material, and then an upper root zone material where most of the root activity in the grass life is being sustained. We wanted to look at how Permavoid can be used within a sports application from a SuDs and a water management point of view. And so what we were looking at is replacing that gravel layer and pipe layer with a single unified layer of Permavoid. And the upper part of that profile is exactly the same. You have the growing medium into which the roots are going to extend, and the players are going to play on, providing the support for the plant. But beneath it, instead of gravel, we have a geotextile or a membrane, and then we have the Permavoid system itself, which is where all the magic happens from a SuDs and a water management point of view. So what is Permavoid? Well, Permavoid is a plastic geocellular system which has been designed explicitly for water management across a whole range of industries. And in the sports market, with looking at the range of sports facilities, there's huge potential as water management is a major aspect of managing turf and dealing with excess and also not enough water and major challenges. So Permavoid as a geocellular system with sort of 93 to 95% airspace has a tremendous storage potential. It's tremendously rigid and structurally very strong and easy to lay as well. So these were the things we were looking at in terms of how we would integrate it into a sports system. So going back to 2013, we were looking at, well, first and foremost, we need to understand and prove the concept that as a layer within that pitch or sports surface construction, it would perform exactly as expected, and that the sports could go on unabated without noticing any difference from a player's point of view. So what do? Well, we built a whole series of test plots, and because we're scientists and we like to do things in replicated fashion using randomized complete block designs, we wanted to test lots of different variations and sort of make sure that it worked in a whole variety of different circumstances. So what did we do? Well, we built up a base, which in this case was replicating a sub base for construction, which we, in this case, we used gravel. We were looking at different depths from very shallow growing material, 50 millimeters, right the way down to a conventional 300 millimeters. And we were looking at a conventional profile with 300 millimeters of growing material over a gravel without the Permavoid in. But all the others, the treatments we were looking at did have Permavoid. So 50 millimeters, 100 millimeters, 200 and 300 millimeters of growing material over a Permavoid base. And this was to validate that really Permavoid was going to do exactly the job we thought it would in that sports pitch construction type scenario. And that research was done here in the UK at our research facility in Bingley in West Yorkshire. The area was built and constructed very much on a big 1 hectare or 800,000 square meter football pitch stadium. You might be using lots of diggers. We're very much at the Aston Martin end of trials. We're building trials by hand, making sure that it's all hand finished and exactly got the requirements we want for the research. So we built up the plots with the Permavoid. We filled them with the growing materials that we were going to investigate. We sowed them with grass seed and then allowed that to establish. And when it was ready, we started treating it just like a football pitch. So using it, measuring and how it performed and behaved with the grass in it in that particular circumstance. So that was going on in the UK. But at the same time, we're also doing work in more tropical, warmer climates where the challenges are the same, but also have different unique challenges in terms of a tropical climate, very wet, but also very hot, highs and lows in terms of water availability. And so could Permavoid in that situation provide benefit, not only just from a structural point of view, but also as its use as a subsurface passive irrigation system. And so this is where we were looking at using that Permavoid layer to tank and store water, which can pull water up into the growing medium, hopefully to provide a more consistent and water efficient source of water for the grass plant in that particular sports surface. And so that research was done at our Redlands facility in Australia. And looking at some of the results we were pulling out of the research, here we've got a graph which is showing NDVI, or Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, which essentially is a composite measure of the color of the turf, the health of the turf, the density of the turf. So it's a good overall indicator of how good quality and happy the turf is. We are putting simulated wear on the surface to sort of replicate what a football player or rugby player is doing to that surface, which is why we can see over time from August 2014 through to February 2015, we see a general decline because we're starting to get bare areas, wear areas. We really want to test the system and it's sort of under harsh conditions. And then as we get into better growing conditions, we can see that the grass cover thickens, plant health improves, and values increase. What's really interesting is that there is no difference really between any of the different Permavoid treatments. So we can look at and say that in reality, there is very little going on in terms of growing a pitch over Permavoid with 50, 100, 200 or 300 millimeters of growing medium, which is pretty revolutionary given that our conventional construction is 100 to 150 millimeters of gravel with 300 millimeters of growing medium on top. So a massive tick in the box to say that Permavoid will fit beautifully into that situation. Again, we were looking at sort of more playing quality differences now, so how the player perceives the surface and interacts with the surface. And we've got a measurement here called traction. What is that all about? Well, it measures the strength of the surface as the player is moving on it, turning and carrying out maneuvers. And again, we can see there are changes over time as a result of what the grass is doing. But we're not seeing consistent or significant differences in between the different types of profiles. So that Permavoid is not influencing the overall strength of the turf. It is doing its job in providing a drainage and structural support, but it is not having any untoward effect on the actual quality of the surface that's being produced. It further ticking the box that it's going to do exactly what it says on the tin in terms of providing a good quality playing surfaces for players to play on. And when we were looking at some of the characteristics which are really important for turf and from an urban hydrological planning point of view, water management, looking at the differences between the conventional way of building a pitch and using that exact profile, but just exchanging the gravel for Permavoid, there are no overall differences in the level of moisture that pitch would hold. So it's still a really great environment for the plant. So that's excellent. When we look at how water moves through that profile, so through that pitch profile into the drainage layer, which could be gravel or Permavoid, again comparing the conventional with approach with the 300 millimeters over Permavoid, looking at infiltration, how quickly water moves into the surface, there is no difference over time. There are differences sort of on different testing dates just because of how the surface performs, but between the two treatments there's no difference. So Permavoid is behaving predictably exactly the way we'd expect it to, really reinforcing the fact that it can absolutely be used within the infrastructure of pitch without any negative effect on the playing quality, the turf growing environment, or on water movement in that particular facility. So that is great checks to say it is going to do what we expect it to do, what it says on the tin. Another element within this whole system is looking at, and this is harking back to what we're talking about in terms of the work going in Australia, using a passive irrigation system to pull water which is stored within that layer of Permavoid for reuse by the pitch. And we did lots of work looking at the different elements of the passive irrigation system, how that would actually work. It works by pulling water out of that tank entirely by capillary action, pulling it up and into the root zone, where it can by further capillary action pull it into where the roots needed in terms of being available to the plant. So we were looking at establishing how that worked, what level it worked, how far apart do we need to have these capillary elements. And when we looked at that again in Australia, through some quite harsh droughty conditions as well as tropical storm conditions, we saw massive water savings when we compare that to just applying water from the surface using conventional pop-up irrigation systems. So on average, we were seeing 34% water savings when we compare standard surface irrigation techniques versus supplying the water from below using passive irrigation. And that's up to 60% in January, when we was obviously got quite hot, dry, droughty conditions then. And that just accentuates the benefits of passive irrigation systems stored under the pitch, because no evaporation, we're not losing any water as we're applying it. All the water is being provided from below and being pulled up through the pitch. So that's tremendous in terms of massive differences in water saving benefits for arid climates and areas where there are significant concerns about water conservation and water management. We were also looking in that same set of research at making sure that there were no impacts or negative impacts, or what were the benefits of having that passive irrigation system in terms of supplying water to the grass plant as and when it needed it. So what we've got here is a graph where we've monitored the actual water available in the growing medium for the grass plant using our conventional top-down irrigation, which is the blue line. And when we applied the irrigation purely by subsurface with the Permavoid system, then absolutely we can see the tremendous benefit in that we're able to maintain optimum moisture content, which for most of these pitches very much is around 15 to 25, whereas with a top-down irrigation it's very difficult to achieve optimum, and it's also very variable. With the subsurface irrigation, you can see there are less peaks and troughs. It's more consistent over time. So that's a tremendous benefit of having a system and solution that can trap, store, hold water, and then allow it to be reused when we have a requirement for it in hotter, more arid times of the year. And it's not just in the conventional sense. We've been looking at it within pitches. We've also been looking at Permavoid in very novel situations. So working with projects like the Stadia pitch, where we've been developing a modular solution where Permavoid is an integral part of the base layer within that because of its strength, lightweight, and water holding capabilities, and that's a massive benefit, and proved really successful. And that, so it's thinking about how some of these characteristics of a geocellular system like Permavoid can have for creating and meeting solutions for different areas of sports. Another sort of non-conventional approach has been looking at Permavoid under temporary surfaces, whether those surfaces are football pitches, synthetic pitches, or whether it's under golf greens or tees, whereby we have a very shallow growing medium, which is supporting the grass plant, sitting on a layer of Permavoid, and making sure and testing that to make sure that that it's a habitable environment for a healthy grass plant, but also it's going to perform as we would expect for the turf, and to make sure the turf is healthy and happy. And we spent a long time looking at Permavoid in that context as a potential solution to meet future demands of how sports facilities and how sports might be played in future, or the ever-changing nature of sports. And Permavoid is not just about the research, it's out there, it's live, it's in the field, and it's, for example, been installed as the drainage layer at Anfield for Liverpool Football Club, and performing very well in that context. So I think it's important that the research builds the technical support and case and usage for systems and solutions, and novel systems and solutions used in novel situations, and then rolling that out into real world installation situations.
Okay, so thanks so much, Christian, for that. Obviously, we use Permavoid in a number of different applications, so blue roofs, SuDs, tree pits, rain garden, build-ups. It's got quite a broad range of areas where it can be integrated. So I suppose the question is, what learning do you think we can take from your findings and transpose that to a broader range of solutions that we can use the system for?
Well, absolutely. And I think the core components of the system, the core characteristics of it, are pretty ubiquitous, and there's a lot of crossover to a whole variety of industries, from civil engineering, as you stated, through to urban green infrastructure, and right the way through to potentially to agriculture and agricultural systems as well. So any system whereby you need to have a strong supportive structure, which needs to be lightweight, it's very quick and easy to install, we've seen that, and where you need it to be able to hold the water and then feed that water back in, is going to provide tremendous benefit. I mean, having seen this solution under temporary surfaces like hockey pitches, football pitches, looking at it as golf tees, under sort of modular solutions, and I know with a wealth of experience of it within the SuDs and the attenuation marketplace, anywhere where water management is critical, Permavoid has a role to play, in my view.
Chris, just to jump in, presumably construction-wise, is it quicker? Is it easier than standard kind of gravel systems?
It certainly is, because it's more compact. It's easier logistically. There are far fewer truckloads of material coming to site, and once you installed it, it provides a layer, a firmed, solid layer that you can then build up. And when we've looked at it sort of time-wise, timing it versus conventional construction approaches, sort of tenfold saving time-wise in terms of being able to get that project in. So on tight projects where tight timelines and logistics are difficult, then it offers tremendous benefit there. Yeah,
well, I think we're hoping to speak to Sue Catton from England Hockey as part of this series, where that benefit really kind of came into its own as part of that kind of tight time scale. Just one other question that springs to mind after seeing the presentation is, you mentioned a bit about the different depths of root zones that STRI tested. What's your kind of thoughts on kind of how that may be applied in future and kind of more practical settings? Is that something people might potentially look at?
I think it could be a tremendous benefit. I think that could be a tremendous benefit, because we're going to be able to look at saving on materials. We're already looking at ways where within sort of the industries of saving aggregate materials because they're non-renewable resource. So if we can save cost and environmental consequence of removing materials, and that's a real benefit. And I think the research with the Permavoid has been tremendous to almost sort of change or shake up our ideas away from the conventional, thinking about the novel, because it's tried and tested. And that's where the research comes in. It's scientifically proven, and that is tremendous succor when you're looking at developing new novel situations. But I think to be able to use shallower profiles for construction, and whether that's across the board for different areas, sort of roof gardens, green roofs, urban planting situations, it will still perform and it will do the job it is intended to do, but with less material. So I think that is a tremendous finding overall.
Yeah, well, it ties in quite nicely, Charlotte. There's been a paper published, I think, a couple of years ago, where the system was used on a green roof, and I think that showed quite clearly with the passive irrigation you could get away with much shallower substrates, obviously helping low bearing.
Absolutely.
So I think that's probably a topic we'll pick up with Nick when we do our blue roof episode as well. So I think we'll leave it there. I think we could, Chris, I know you could talk all day about this. But thanks again, that was really good. You've managed to summarise 6 years worth of research into broadly 15 minutes. So fantastic. Thanks everyone for watching, and join us next time when we'll welcome Sean Robinson to discuss some more physical case studies on the ground where we're using the types of technologies we've discussed today.